Hi, welcome to this session in the Independent Games Summit of the Game Developers Conference. We called this one, You Have to Stop Working, Even When You Can't Stop Working. And I've spoken to many people throughout the years about crunch and burnout, and suffice to say, I'm not a fan, do not recommend. None of us are. We just get stuck in it anyway, somehow, don't we? I had the idea for this panel because usually when we talk about crunch and burnout in the broader game industry, the worst crimes against developers tend to be studio management ordering people in their power to work harder and burn themselves out faster. But in the indie space, we can often burn ourselves out more joyfully, more enthusiastically, and more violently than any AAA worker because literally no one can stop us. Not legally, not physically, not emotionally. It's just us versus ourselves. So here are a few very experienced independent developers with different insights and strategies for how to avoid working yourself to death. You deserve a long career, my friend, making games, many, many games in the years to come. So please listen carefully to their survival strategies. Good luck.
Hi, everyone. I am Chandan Ekanayaka. I'm the co-founder and creative director of Outer Loop Games here in Seattle. I've been in the game industry for almost 24 years. I was born in Sri Lanka, and my parents moved us when I was about 8 years old during a civil war going to Sri Lanka to the States. They didn't feel comfortable us being there. Me, my brother, and my sister were pretty young, and they wanted to have more opportunities for us. So we moved to the U.S., lived in Maryland, went to art school in Savannah, Georgia, and I watched my parents, having to start over, moving to a whole new country, and I think I learned a lot of my work ethic from watching them, see how hard they worked to provide for us. So I went to art school and then got a job at Bethesda at 19, right place, right time. And I just did everything I possibly could. When someone asked me to do something, I did it. I felt like the only way I could get ahead in games was to just throw myself onto it and do anything that it needed to get done. So I started in art, got into production, UI, trailers, design work, whatever needed to get done on the project. I was willing to do it. Eventually moved over to LA and Orange County, where I worked on a couple of Matrix titles for the movies that were coming out at the time. And then we eventually, after having our first kid, moved to the Seattle area, and we've been living there since. In my 20 years prior to starting Outer Loop, I worked on a bunch of different games, and the team sizes varied from 10, 15 to 150 to 200 people, depending on the project. And there was one commonality with all of these, with the studios I worked at, was that the game had to ship, the game had to get done, and we needed to do whatever we could to help with that. It wasn't necessarily, some places, and depending on the time, there was some mandatory crunch, but most places it's not mandatory crunch. It's this more implied crunch. It's the scheduling, it's peer pressure from the team, or it's major deadline with the publisher, external pressure. It all amounted in us working a lot of hours. I mean, there were times during working on Enter the Matrix that I put in 100-hour weeks because the game had to get done for the movies that were coming out, and that was a fixed date. So regardless of the issues we were having on the design side or production, it just meant a lot of us were working a lot of hours. I mean, I would come home 3 a.m, barely see my partner, get up in the morning, after a couple hours of sleep, and do it all over again. And that after a while, years of doing that, just takes a huge mental and physical toll on your body. And when you're, working that many hours, you're not being very productive. Like you can barely think of what's going on. You're making a lot of mistakes. It's just not healthy, and it's especially not healthy for the long term. So having done that for 20 plus years, I decided that, there must be a better way to do it. And I want to be able to spend more time with my partner, spend more time with my family, and with my kids. So about 4 years ago, I started Outer Loop as a fully remote studio. I think the timing was good. The tools and technology has gotten better with Zoom and Discord and Slack. We were able to, myself and 2 other partners that I've started the company with that I'd worked with before, we decided to try it remotely. And we all work out of our houses. It's grown from 3 people to 4 people to, our first project was about 9 when we shipped. I was still learning how to run a company and still doing too much. So there's like a responsibility and a work ethic that I learned over the years, and some of the habits are really hard to break. I think a lot of my self-worth was tied into how productive I was being, which is not a healthy way to make anything or make a living. So over the years, I've learned to try to make myself more redundant, hire people that we need to fill certain roles so that I'm not trying to do like 8 different jobs. That's been healthier. And after having kids, we're forced to kind of budget our time better. Like, I wanted to see my kids' first steps and spend time with them as they grow up, because they do grow up fast. I mean, everyone tells you that kids grow fast, but oh boy. Yeah. I mean, 14 years, 15 years with my, 2 sons have gone by real quickly. So starting the studio remote was also just a decision for myself and my partner to spend more time with our family. And part of that is also making time for other things outside of games and staying away from the screen. So I coach sports. Before COVID, I would coach sports with both of my kids. And now that things are getting better in Washington, I'm doing that again. It's been really healthy, not just mentally, physically, to kind of stay away from the work side when I'm not working. Creatively, it's been a lot better too, to have that break, to focus on something else, to solve problems. You kind of have to step away sometimes, and it's made for a better work environment, a better family life balance. But it's a constant struggle. I mean, I'm pulled in constantly to think about, like, how's the team doing? And, are we paying our bills on time? And everyone get, all that stuff. But I'm trying to shut off work when I'm not at work and focus on work when I am. The team is up to 15 now. We're spread across 9 cities and, 12-hour time differences. So we're definitely trying to find different ways for that to work. We're more empathetical for the different needs. Even though COVID situation in the U.S. has gotten better, it's not the same in other parts of the world where our partners are. So, over the last year, it's been really stressful on everybody too, and, make sure that people have time. We encourage mental health days. We encourage people to take minimum number of days off. They have to take a number of days off every year. We try to make sure, check in on people more often, make sure they're doing well. And scheduling wise, for the amount of work that's required, we're trying to be better about that too, so that they're not feeling the same kind of pressures I did in my previous companies, where I felt like I had to get stuff done because everyone else was doing. So I need myself as a studio head need to do a better job as an example for the rest of the team. The team is a little older. So, one of my partners had a baby recently. So we made sure that he had 3-4 months of paternity leave, and we plan around that. We know that's a coming thing, and we plan around it. So far, it's been working out pretty well, but it's a constant struggle for myself to make sure that I'm not doing too much, which is easy habit to get back right into. So yeah, working, for 24 years, I've learned a lot to what not to do, and it's really healthy, and it's better for the project and the team. If you can take the time, you definitely should take the time, and it's responsibility on the studio heads and the production team to make sure that the project is scheduled in a way that people's mental health and well-being are taken into account. That's the biggest part of making any game, is the people. And if you're not taking care of yourself or your folks, then it's just, in the long run, it's just not going to be healthy, and the products won't do as well, and neither will the studio. All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Astrid. My pronouns are she, her. I'm CEO and co-founder of Triple Topping Games and advisor to Cowboy Knights. Ever since we funded Triple Topping, it has been important for us to rethink how we structure work and allow ourselves to stop working. If you're curious on how we handle all this in details, you can always read our contract and employee handbook on our website. Before I start, I just want to give a small trigger warning, especially for those who are parents themselves. Some context. To give the best understanding of my talk, I want to share a little bit of my current personal life situation. Last year, I gave birth to our baby Bobby. They were born premature week 34 with an emergency C-section. Since then, we have learned that Bobby most likely suffered from a chronic illness, and we have spent countless hours at the hospital. I, for the first time, had to say no to things I planned. I even took a break from my work at Cowboy Nights. But working is also what helped both my partner and I to focus on something else and allow ourselves to take a small break from the hospital. Socialize with other people and be creative and have a sense of normality. I'm thankful that I always practice to stop working. Otherwise, I would not in time have realized that that's what I had to do. I hope that the learnings I share today can be helpful for others too. Why it's hard to stop. Most people want to do the absolute best at any given job. On top of this, most people identify themselves by the profession and the job they do, especially in the games industry. This makes it incredibly hard to stop working. Personally, I don't believe in what I call the Netflix model. They share a handbook with no fixed amount of work hours. Because how do you know when to stop? What if your colleagues work more? Are you then lazy? Or maybe your boss thinks you are. I believe we need to help ourselves to stop. I believe we should all just agree on working less hours. Our industry combines conferences, parties, fun hangouts on Discord, and even rollerblades with our work. The lines between spare time and work are blurred. Game development are for some a lifestyle, not a job. It's our own way of coping with work-life balance, and it's a huge part of why I love this industry, but it also makes it so hard to stop working. I learned all this myself the hard way when I was expecting my first child, and once again when Bobby arrived. My love, care, and headspace were needed somewhere else than on our company Slack channel. Most of us have a hard time not to think about work in our spare time. It's because our work makes us worry. You worry about the job role, the next deadline, that comment during lunch, if the CEO likes you or dislikes you, how to announce your pregnancy, etc. So to stop working, you also have to learn how to stop worrying. And I use this tool by advice from my dear brother. If it's not a problem in 6 months, it's not a problem now. Like running a studio, doing a job, life can be challenging, and sometimes you're presented with a hill that seems too high to climb. To help myself, I think of challenging this way. Most things within 6 months from now have presented itself with a solution. A good or bad solution, but a solution. A breakup right now, when it's happening, it can feel like the end of the world, but in 6 months you will start to move forward and see all the new positive changes in your life. It can also be a game release. In 6 months from now, the game is out. Maybe it will do amazingly, maybe not, but you will know and you will have the answer. Some things will not have presented itself with a solution in 6 months from now. Climate changes, for example. So we should worry about that. I even schedule when to worry. Very often your worries lies in the hands of other people, like a yes or no on funding. But until they give you that answer, stop worrying about it. I will also not allow myself to think about my worries before I sleep. It's hard and I practice this every night, but I always tell myself a good story before I sleep. Sometimes I have to make it up. I know it's easy to tell you to stop worrying about work, especially going through a pandemic, many of us working alone from home, but it's always good to practice. How I stop working. Communication goes a long way. If you tell everyone when you are not working, it actually helps you to keep that promise to yourself too. So communicate to people when your work hours are. Let them know if you are on vacation and when you are back. Respect other people's time zones and office hours too. I put my work hours and time zones in my email footer. It helps a lot. Realize things can wait. No need to email or reply at 1 a.m. Other people are sleeping. Budget and plan for time off. Things takes time. Game development a long time. But try not to make a budget and time schedule that requires you to work 70 hours per week. It's like taking a loan on your own health. You can't keep doing it. Demand of your partner to be equal in parenthood, not only when it comes to weekends, but during work week too. My partner and I have worked every second day. It helped us to structure our work schedules and be 100% there for Bobby when they needed it. It made planning work-wise easy. Set goals and monitor your work time. Go from 50 to 40 or 40 to 35 hours. At some point, you will get the same amount of work done in 32 hours. The benefit from this is also that if you need to work more, like towards a big deadline, a game release, for example, it would take a lot of extra work before you end up having to work long nights. Working towards a more healthy work life takes practice, but it's just as important as the game you are making. I know taking time off and working is a privilege. It requires you to have a secure job in the first place, to have sick pay, paid holiday, live in a welfare state, and unions to advocate your rights. Ironically, to be able to stop work, you need to have the resources to work. We are all in this together, but some of us have a lot more power than others. While I'm speaking from a small business perspective, the power for change lies at both ends of the spectrum. The small power I have to set an example or to advocate still needs to be met by the big corporations to build better working conditions, better publishing contracts, and better internal cultures overall. So I'm inviting all of us who are privileged enough to be able to take my advice on how to stop working, to help those who are not. Support people of color, indigenous people, women, non-binary people, trans people, queer people, and recognize that the struggle for a life worth living is also bigger than work. It is in solidarity for the people suffering apartheid in Palestine. It is an advocacy for migrants and global human rights. Hire diverse candidates. Take your job as an employer seriously. Listen and learn. Put your money and your advocacy out there. Buy people's work. Make space. Make connections. Pass the mic. Let's work together to redesign our industry with dignity in mind. And thank you, Hannah Nitschling, for helping me putting together this last slide. And thank you all for listening.
Hi, I'm Danny Day. I run a 14-year-old game studio in South Africa and occasionally contract internationally. I burnt out really hard last year while working for a wonderful US studio that had very little to do with it. I burnt out because Timezone-related overwork combined with having a toddler and the global pandemic to completely overwhelm the lifelong coping mechanisms I'd built up around undiagnosed ADD. I went from being a high-functioning person that relied on hyperfocus and random inspiration to someone that was barely able to focus on anything and constantly failing to spot glaring errors in what I did manage to do. After a difficult conversation, I took a month off, then resigned. I really, really had to stop working. Things are much better now. I'm excited to be running a team and making a game, armed with understanding of my ADD, good therapists, and support of an amazing partner. So I'll be talking about two things: avoiding time zone stress and how to get the most out of therapy. Sleep. Sleep is important. The major mechanism of time zone stress is a lack of or severely disturbed sleep. Bad sleep is a huge red flag. Remote working is great for flexibility, but working across time zones can get complex. It's normal to want to work with the people you work with. Not only is pure asynchronous communication difficult, but the times when you can chat directly to your coworkers and pair up on issues just feel so much more productive. Work hours tend to shift as a result. It usually starts out as just being up late or early for this one thing, which goes really well. Soon your work hours have shifted slightly to give you more overlap with your coworkers. Then meetings get scheduled for when you're always around. To keep up the pace, you shift your day a little more. Spot the feedback loop. It requires constant effort to prevent time zone slippage. For some people, like me, it's nearly impossible to avoid, and we end up working a local night shift completely disconnected from where we live. In my case, that was a feature at first. Working remotely for a US studio meant I could look after our infant child and get work done all night. But as the child started sleeping through, the demands on my time meant I couldn't just sleep all day. Fast forward a couple of years, and I was working in 3 distinct chunks every day, interspersed with hours of responsibilities in my regular time zone and sleeping and eating at incredibly strange times. I was essentially experimenting with polyphasic work. and it felt like being jet lagged for months at a time. Cool, so that sucks. How do we not do that? Individually, you can counteract the pull into another time zone by focusing more on maintaining a constant starting time that's good for where you live. People will learn that you're always on at X time, but now that will work in your favor because they'll leave comms waiting for you or have quick handover meetings. Be reasonably ruthless about when you're not going to work. Sure, make yourself available for meetings and special things that need everyone's attention, but if you're doing those outside of what would be regular work hours for you, set time limits on those meetings and don't keep working afterward. Acknowledge that you're going to be working async a lot and plan around that. Make sure you always have tasks you can switch to if you get blocked on anything waiting for someone to get back to you. Be proactive about issues when they pop up and treat your pairing and co-working times as precious. Schedule and push for socializing time with your coworkers. This is fine to do outside regular work hours, and be open to people wanting to socialize with you in their off hours as well, because this doubles the time you have for connections. Monitor your time in more than just hours spent. Track your start and end times each day, spot trends, and watch for slippage. If you're routinely staying on through your coworkers' entire workdays, stop and take a breather. When it comes to running studios across multiple time zones, it's part of your responsibility to build systems that help your team members avoid time zone stress. This sounds obvious, but be aware of everyone's time zones. Build in automatic do not disturbs based on when they don't want to be working. Respect their time when you schedule those inevitable meetings outside their workday, and if someone's obviously working later and later, check if they're okay. Plan far enough in advance that people are comfortable working asynchronously and picking up other tasks if they're blocked waiting for someone else. Treat that kind of waiting as a conveyor optimization task for yourself, rather than an availability problem on their part. Cut down on the concept of core hours that require everyone to be around. They're directly undermining your asynchronous capabilities. I get why core hours feel like a good idea, and you definitely do need some kind of occasional overlap so that important discussions can be had, but try to figure out ways to make those less frequent. And finally, commit to being remote. If some of your studio works at the same office, that's going to become the de facto time zone that everyone else is pulled towards. Part of this is making sure all your meetings can be caught up on the next day. You don't have to be minuting everything, but at least record decisions and expected outcomes. No time for a segue. On to the therapy cheat sheet. Therapy is a good thing. If there's one takeaway from my part of this talk, it's that you should go to therapy, even if it's only for a limited period, preferably well before you hit a situation like mine. The thinking that eventually got me looking for a therapist went something like this. What if I've frog-boiled myself into using up loads of resources just to function each day? What if there are other ways to exist that leave me less drained, and I can't see them from where I am now, but there are literally professionals that can help me figure this sort of stuff out? In my case, that led to an adult diagnosis of ADD, which has been incredibly helpful. Just understanding how and why I make decisions and how that differs from other people's mechanisms has alleviated so much stress and made running a team much easier. It's very important to know what you want from therapy. That can be catharsis, healing, new tools, self-knowledge, anything based on poking how you feel inside your own brain. It's not just the extremes of sobbing on the couch, which is perfectly okay, or some personification of a grinning self-help book on steroids. Different therapists prefer different approaches and patients. Finding a therapist is a lot like dating. You're going to need to meet a bunch of different people until you find someone that gels with you, because therapists make that same call from their side as well. Also, please note that I'm coming at this from a privileged perspective in South Africa, where I can both afford and choose therapists. Other people in my country don't have as many options, and other countries' health systems restrict choice in other ways. It can be extremely exhausting to sit down with a person you've just met in a strange environment, pour parts of yourself out in front of them, and feel like they're just not engaging. Because they're not. A trained therapist will want to know as much about you and your situation as they can before they decide if they can indeed help or not. Until they know, they'll make extra sure they're not going to get in the way of anyone else. At the end of your first session with someone, if they think they can't help, they'll be extra distanced and disconnected. This isn't them judging you. It's them making sure they don't set anything in motion that another therapist won't know about. They really do want to help, so ask for recommendations for therapists they feel might work for you. Once you find a therapist you can work with, be prepared for things to take time. Very few therapists are going to recommend anything super impactful early on. It's mostly tests, questions, and trying out theories. You didn't get to where you are overnight, and your therapist first needs to figure out where that even is before you can start taking steps to move elsewhere. Thankfully, things add up over time. You're not obligated to keep seeing anyone that makes you uncomfortable, and you can always ask your therapist to stop any practices or methodologies for whatever reason. Therapy is about ongoing consent. Getting a diagnosis is a complex set of feelings to navigate, especially as an adult. It's important to know that you're still the same person and your life doesn't need to change drastically. You just know more about yourself. How you choose to use that knowledge is up to you, and you don't have to disclose any diagnoses to anyone else in your life if you don't want to. A diagnosis isn't a sentence or a proclamation about you. Most of the time, they're great for giving you a window into how the fuck other people do what they do. Medication isn't just something that happens. It's a okay, hang on. Let's go into more depth about medication. Medication can only come from registered psychiatrists. Often, you'd be recommended to a psychiatrist by another therapist you're seeing. Psychologists can do diagnoses, but no meds. If someone that's not a psychiatrist recommends or offers medication, stay away. The choice to be medicated or not is up to you. Attitudes towards medication are complex, but the most important thing is how safe and empowered you feel. Additionally, please don't weigh in on anyone else's choice to medicate or not. That's gross. Psychiatrists issue medication. They're the pilot in a plane that's taking you to a destination of your choice. If you want to get off, they'll land it for you and help you pick a different flight. But self-medicating is a bit like hijacking a plane because your friend likes shrooms and has played a lot of Flight Simulator. Don't do it. Should you choose to start medicating, know that the best approaches to medication are long-term. Nothing is a silver bullet. Yes, some people start meds and find that their situations change almost overnight, but if you've got a network of coping habits already, figuring out how and when those change due to medication takes time. A good psychiatrist will ease you into a medication gradually, letting you know what to expect and what to watch out for. It's perfectly okay to say, nope, I don't like how this impacts me, and look for something else. Everyone's relationship with their meds is different, and we get different things out of them. Sometimes meds are long-term interventions like glasses, giving you a different perspective that you couldn't hold before. Other times, meds are short-term, like someone loaning you a car so you can get back on your feet. Provided you're working with your therapist, there is no right or wrong way to be medicated or not. In fact, there is no right or wrong way to be, full stop. Therapy is just a very good way to get someone else's expert input on how you are, so that you can decide where to go next. You should try it. Thank you. Please feel free to ask me any questions in the chat.
Hey everyone, my name is Rebecca Saltzman, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit today about our work-life balance at Finji. And I've entitled this talk, Constrained by Space and Time, which we are. We are constrained by space and time. I'm the CEO of Finji, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself real quick. We are both a development studio and an independent publisher. So we make our games and we publish games. Some of the things that we made internally are Cannibalt, that endless runner from 2009. And also Overland, which we launched in 2019. And sort of in the in-between years, we have launched Night in the Woods, Wilmot's Warehouse, Feist, Panoramical. And last week, because I'm recording this a little bit early, we launched Chicory, A Colorful Tale on PS5. Why am I here? Because we have opinions on work-life balance. I run my studio with my husband and partner, Adam Saltzman, and we have a family. So running a studio and having a family can be a bit tricksy. So Finji, there's so much about Finji that wants to take over my life. It's kind of endless. We have our games. Adam and I have been mentors for a really long time in the industry. We support initiatives all over. We have events in person and online now. I have to manage budgets and pitch decks and HR and operations and talks and travel and meetings, and I could go on and on and on and on. And Finji doesn't want to give up any time. It can be a bit of a black hole. It does want to be every single day of my life. The to-do list will never end. The emails just keep coming, including on weekends, because weekends are work days in some places. And if I let Finji really take over, if I pay attention to it 100% of the time, I actually won't have any more time for me or my family or my kids or my hobbies. There is always, always, always something more to do. Dear Finji, please leave me alone. And like, I can say that, it's my company, but also like, seriously, Finji, leave me alone. It's been a lot of years and I kind of just don't want a to-do list anymore. Because let's be real, this is way effing more important than making video games. My family and my pets and playing at the beach in the summer, like at the end of my time here on Earth, I have my creative life, but I also have my family life. And that is equally as important as just making cool things. And there are so many obstacles staying in the way of what's important to me. We have my work to-do list that never goes away. My work and my computer live in my house, and the pandemic has made that way worse. I'm actually in my office right now by myself. It's very weird. I have external pressures that feel incompatible to flexibility. For example, we have money, like we have a finite amount of money. My family needs my time. My team needs my time. My publishing partners need my time. My team has expectations of me alongside with my family and my business development partners. All of these things are incompatible to being flexible. I also have like years of poor record keeping, not just from me, but sort of from all of us collectively. Like, did we write things down? And are we redoing work that we just poorly documented in the past? And then we have destructive internal dialogues. The most insidious of which is fake it till you make it. And I say it all the time. But like, at what point am I not faking it anymore? Like, how much do I really have to work to not fake it? Am I working hard enough to deserve what I have? Or am I convinced I'm not working hard enough so I can't get what I want? Like, all this stuff is just there in my head, keeping me from trying to take time to myself. And then why am I working all alone? Sometimes we really are working alone. We're a single person team, or we're the only expert in our particular field. We have no one to bounce things off of, which means it feels like we have to work twice as hard or 10 times as hard to like prove to ourselves we're doing it right. So all of this stuff has been here. Like, we're years, over a decade into Finji now. And at a certain point, Adam and I are like, yeah, we really need to change. We need to change our mentality. We just need to think a little bit harder about like how we're going to work in this industry for a long time, because we can't burn out. We have burned out and we have suffered the consequences of that. Gotta say, the flu after PAX and GDC sucks. So how did we change? And this is going to sound really stupid, but the very first thing that we changed back when we like sort of rebranded Finji is we published a mission statement to hold ourselves, me and Adam, accountable. And like, it seems sort of light and fluffy or whatever, but there's a really important piece of it at the bottom, which is like, we practice inclusive team policies that support good quality of life, meaning no crunch. And we provide significant revenue shares or bonuses, however you want to use that word, for all team members. And that was written because we, Adam and I, needed to understand that we couldn't crunch. And we wrote this when we were parents of 2 young children. Now, like, this was our deal with ourselves. And then we had to take that and make that same deal with our collaborators. So we have our Finji policies where we work 40-hour work weeks. We have collaborator buy-in on short studio sprints, time zone overlaps per discipline and team to make sure we overlap and are working together. We have 5 planned weeks of studio closure every year that are paid. We have unlimited scheduled PTO. We have maternity leave and paternity leave benefits. We have sick days, flexible work locations. We have weekends that don't belong to Finji. We have comp time after travel and sprints. But I can say these things all day long, but it's just a promise. It's our job to follow our own policies and to be honest with ourselves. If we expect our teams to take time off, Adam and I have to take time off as well. We have to be intentional about this. So how do we do it? And this seems like an impossible problem in front of us. And we just took some really simple steps to sort of hold ourselves accountable. And the first thing is we have a production schedule. And that seems obvious, but we have a schedule. We put things on it. We use it. We share it with the team. We schedule short-term, medium-term, long-term, 12 months from now. These are things that we have to do, and they're going to change, but at least we have it written down so we understand the context of changes. We plan for and announce studio closures. We help the team wrap up projects or come to a reasonable pausing point before those studio closures. We actually have one in like 2 weeks. And studio closures means we don't work. Like, yes, Discord lives on when we're not at work, but we also have admins that help us manage while we're on break. We have backups. So if somebody needs to go on vacation, we have somebody who can take over their spot if it needs to be taken over while they're gone. Now, how else do we do it? We have communication rules. You know the saying about assume. Don't make an ass of me and you, or you and me, however you want to say it. We have to have collaborator buy-in. We can't have assumptions on how people are going to work. Your partners, your people that you live with, and your family, you can't assume that they're okay with what you're doing. They're probably not. Have you talked to them? You need to have buy-in from them. You need to have these conversations. We try to solve problems with solutions, and we tend not to discuss the merits of ideas or opinions because those can get us bogged down in valuing people rather than solving problems. And that's how we keep our design discussions and our to-do lists and task lists sort of on track. And then we write things down. We write down so much stuff. We have definitely discovered the value of documentation. And we also trust but validate. We have team one-on-one check-ins to see how our collaborators are doing. We also do validation for our tasks. So if we're going to put something on a programmer's schedule, we need to understand how long is this sort of stuff going to take. Because if you are wrong or wildly wrong, or you didn't have that conversation, you may have assigned a 20-hour task when you thought it took 2. And now you are setting someone up to fail and to not be able to take time and to have that work-life balance. And we have constant collaboration, or not collaboration, we do that too. We have constant calibration that what we're working on is the right thing at the right time. Sometimes you need to punt things because you're going to get bogged down in something that doesn't have a solution yet. And we've gotten very comfortable with punting it forward and doing something that we can do in the time that we have. And we rely on these processes to keep us honest with ourselves. Because we can't have Finji and making things take over our entire life because we're more than what we create. Now, I'm a lot of people outside of games. Like, I'm a person that you don't know. When I'm home here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I have hobbies and I have friends who don't work in games and I have interests that are not making things and creating things. And I am able to have these things because at a certain point I realized I had to have these things. And yes, parenthood forced a bit of it, but I could have ignored that. I could have let that continue to encroach upon the life that I sort of agreed to have with both my husband and my family. I have birthday parties and soccer games and swim meets and dance recitals, and those have nothing to do with games. And I want you to think, if nothing else, after this talk today, the thing that I want you to think about is, who are you outside of games? Who are you beyond your projects? Are you comfortable with who that person is? And have you given time? Have you given that person space to also be a complete person? And that's work-life balance. And we had to use process and documentation and communication skills to put together a laborious process for us to make room for that person that wasn't, Rebecca Saltzman, game developer, Adam Saltzman, game designer. We had to make room for the people who's Becca Saltzman, mom, me, a dancer, me, a goofball who makes Halloween costumes for my kids. I had to make space for that. And we did that by making sure that Finji space belonged to Finji. Now, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm on the Twitters and I don't shut my DMs. But yeah, feel free. Thank you for listening. I'm probably going to be taking questions someplace when this show's in about a month. But thank you.
Hey there. On this beautiful day, I'm going to talk to you about how I manage my motivation and deadlines whilst preventing myself from crunching, even though I still remain productive and ambitious. Small spoiler though, it's really hard. Before I dive into that, a quick minute about me. My name is Celine Veldman and I make games and other forms of art here in Utrecht. That's a cozy city in the center of the Netherlands. The best known thing I've worked on is called Hidden Folks, an interactive Where's Waldo designed and created by Adrian de Jong and Sylvain de Groeg. And I specifically worked on the last 2 levels, where I did the design and the interaction. I'm currently working on some personal projects and a godlike card game called Simulant. But the second one, it's out on the open, but we haven't made an official announcement yet. And I'm doing this together with my good friend Timon. He's the original creator and designer of the first Simulant. And in this project, I do mainly the art and the design. I work on all my things in a co-working space with a bunch of great friends, and the space is called Boomhut. This is a really nice place where we can easily share ideas, talk about our work and also our work style. So I've seen a lot of things there, and I also have seen a lot of crunches. I think to crunch is a very personal thing, and it's hard to give a clear definition. It kind of boils down to when you're working more hours in a day, or feeling more frequently tired or sad than usual, or when you constantly think about work and have a hard time stopping that. I would call that crunching. It can have several reasons too. Most obviously, a deadly deadline. Or you perhaps really love what you're doing and it's hard to stop working or thinking about it. That's the one I struggle most with is an ambitious obligation to yourself and the strong will to achieve something or make something great. And it's really easy to justify bad working habits when you're working on something you're very enthusiastic about or you feel like you really need to. And besides, how can being productive be a bad thing? Well, let me give you some examples. Let's start with my development experience with Hidden Folks. During the development, I was allowed to have a very flexible development style, as Adrian de Jong is a very chill guy. And I was able to set my own deadlines and work at my own pace and ship the game basically once it was ready. So, especially towards the end, when all the fun parts had been done, I felt pressure building as time was passing by and my money was running out. I remember working my late evenings during my weekends and taking my laptop with me on my holidays. And at some point I even went back to taking Ritalin, which is a drug that helps you concentrate. It works well, but I knew it also made me nervous, depressed and more socially anxious. So yeah, I also had moments when I was really deep into a project, like my website, and I really loved working on it. And I had a hard time stopping and thinking about it or doing other things. Although making my website gave me quite some energy, it drained way more in the end. There was a moment, and actually several smaller ones, where I just lost all confidence in what I had done and I really disliked the sight of my work. Looking back now, I did not take enough breaks and therefore didn't really have time to reflect on it. And being exhausted from continuously working did not help my mindset at all. If I had taken the distance I needed, I could have easily prevented these lower moments and stayed motivated towards the end. Currently, things with Simulant go at a very chill pace. 2 reasons for that is that we just don't stress it. Timon and I really like a chill workflow, and also Timon has to release a game every 4 months, so that creates an obligated break in the development every, did I say 2? I mean 4 months. So yeah, it creates a break, but it actually has been quite interesting, and quite positively so. It gives us time to reflect and have a better perspective on the project. And therefore, I think we made some better design choices and better art-related choices, in fact. I don't expect it to be completely crunch-free, but I feel confident that we'll manage any pressure quite well. And then I have to be frank and honest, because being crunch-free is really hard, like I said, even when you really want to. And ironically, whilst making this talk, I've been actually experiencing a fresh little crunch just now. I really wanted to perform well and put a lot of pressure on myself. Besides, I really enjoy doing this. I've been working in evenings and in my free times and not taking enough breaks for some part. So actually breaking most of the rules I had written in the first place. On top of that, I thought this recording was due next week, the beginning of next week, but it was actually Friday. So what did I do? Nothing. I did nothing. So Tuesday I walked for several hours in a row. Then Wednesday I spent all my time or all the morning working at Boomhut because it's quite new and it needs to be built still. And Thursday I went on to go climbing and worked on some other stuff. So yeah, when I was working, I made sure I was taking enough breaks, and that little distance every time allowed me to have a better reflection on all I'd written and drawn. So whether your continuous working style comes from a strong ambition, often like mine is, or a crushing deadline, or an enthusiasm for the work you're doing that makes it hard to stop, I present to you my ultimate list of things you can do. So the first thing I would say is you could keep track of your working hours. I've been doing this for 1.5 years, and I love this kind of data. It actually gave me a lot of insight on my behavior and style. Plus, it made me realize when I've been slacking off a bit or actually working really hard when I felt I wasn't. I do this in Google Sheets, and you can do it precisely as precise as you want. But in the end, it's going to give you an overview of how many hours you work on something, what hours you tend to start and stop, and how efficient you're working. And that's also when you're making over hours. So I'm not the only one who does this. I actually got the idea by being inspired by my other game developer friends. Everyone that I know who does this would totally recommend it. It really helps with other things too, like making it easier to start working and making sure you have enough breaks. Then another tip I have for you is guard your weekends and evenings with your life. Seriously, I hear this over and over again, and it's a very important thing to safeguard. Keep at least 1 hour before bed solely for relaxing purposes, because you need time to wind down from your day and get a good rest. Not doing that will exhaust you very, very quickly. Then a thing you could do is work out a bit, you lazy bastard. I myself love to work, love to boulder, no matter what deadline or how deep I'm into my work. I go 2 or 3 times a week, not because I'm a very fit or active person. Believe me, I'm not. But I found that it really helps my mind to get off things, and it's really nice for stress relief. So it also keeps you healthy, and some other more smart people would tell you that's healthy too. So yeah, you could work out a bit, and it doesn't really matter if you like to climb, run, swim, or try at least to walk an hour a day. And I'll tell you, it helps a lot. And then what I find the most important one is to take breaks. Maybe every hour, but at least every 2. Go outside for a walk, make yourself some tea, coffee, Or in the evenings, play a game, watch a series at night, read a book, find what works for you. But this not only gives your mind time to calm down, but it gives you a fresh look on your work when you're restarting it and dive back into it. If you still feel stress and you find yourself not relaxing and still like working it out in your mind, it still helps a lot. And when things are really bad and you have a really, really hard time relaxing, try to go back to being in the moment. Look at small things around you. Try to listen to the noises. And that helps me relax in even some really hard days. And on top of taking breaks being good for a busy mind, it's also most important for your work too, as it resets your focus and opens up space for a new idea and gives the necessary break for your mind, preventing total exhaustion. So I've been practicing these tactics for quite some time now, and although it's hard to remain totally crunch-free, I think it's very possible, and I hope you try one of these tips and you'll find them useful. Anyway, it's time to take a break now. I think I'll leave these for you, and take good care, and thank you for listening.